Duval. Welcome to Bleav In Jaguars. I'm Bucky Brooks. What's up, Duval? It's your favorite Jaguar, Bucky Brooks, and this is Bleav In Jags, a podcast dedicated to all things Jacksonville Jaguars football. And we are maybe a week away before the Jacksonville Jaguars come back to Jacksonville, get ready to go to training camp, and begin their quest to dominate in 2024. Today, we're going to talk about what the Jaguars need to do if they are going to be a Super Bowl team, namely the personnel in place and which players need to play at a blue chip level to be able to lead this team to the promised land. Before we talk about this, let's send a shout out to our sponsor, Bet Online, your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season. From baseball, golf, soccer, right to the top fights in UFC and MMA and boxing, every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads while games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. And since we're talking about the game starting here, we're talking about training camp being a week away. I wanted to go back to a conversation I had a long time ago with six-time NFL Executive of the Year, Bill Polian, Hall of Fame inductee, a guy who built a Buffalo Bills team that went to 4 straight Super Bowls in the early 90s. He also eventually won a Super Bowl with the Indianapolis Colts. And what Mr. Polian did is we had a conversation. I played in Buffalo for a little bit, but he was gone when I got there. But later in life, we tracked each other down, and I was able to really talk to him about building a championship team. And one of the things from that conversation that resonates with me, he said, if a team is going to compete at a championship level, you need to have 8 to 12 guys that are blue chip players, guys that can compete at a level where you can put them in the conversation to be a top 10 player at that position. So when we talk about blue chip player, we're talking about someone that you can reasonably say is one of the top 5 best players at his position. And if you really hold it to a higher standard, it's a guy that could eventually ascend to be a top 5 talent at that position. Well, when you think about those lofty expectations, it certainly makes sense that if you are going to be a team that competes at a championship level, having 8 to 12 of those guys certainly will put you in the conversation, because what you're saying is I have 8 to 12 elite players, not guys that are good, but guys that are really good, exceptionally talented, that can get it done. And to just give you a point of reference, when Bill Polian talks about those Buffalo Bills teams that went to those 4 straight Super Bowls, and even though everyone laughs at that team because that team was unable to win, let's talk about some of the Hall of Famers that came from that team. Jim Kelly, Bruce Smith, Andre Reed, Thurman Thomas. So 4 Hall of Famers on that team. And so when we're talking about grading players and evaluating the roster, that's the lofty standard that we're holding our players to when we talk about championship puzzle, the pieces to a championship puzzle. Who are the guys that can help get this team over the top? And so what I did is I took the weekend to really study the roster, and I wanted to kind of outline, here are the players that I believe are the blue chip players currently on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Here's the next tier players that have the potential to be blue chip players with just a reasonable growth in their game to put them in the conversation to be top 10, maybe even top 5 players at their respective positions. And then here are the wild cards, the next group of players who have the talent to do it, but maybe we haven't seen it. They need to push. They need more attention when it comes to being able to compare them to the guys that are regarded as the standard bearers at the position around the league. So the established blue chip players, when I look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, the number one player right now is Josh Hines Allen. When you go to Josh and you watch his game and you look at what he was able to do last year, 17 and a half sacks. He's a guy who has been dynamic and dominant as a pass rusher at times. And even though it took him a long time to get his money, I think on the field, he's everything that you look for in terms of your lead pass rusher off the edge. He has speed, he has quickness, he has explosiveness, he has proven production over time. And last season, look, he really had to do it when the team didn't have what I would say favorable odds for being able to get after the quarterback, meaning the offense wasn't putting up points in a manner in which teams were having to chase points. So he didn't have I would say, the luxury of being able to go after quarterbacks when everyone in the stadium knows that these guys have to throw. That's when pass rushers typically eat. For Hines Allen, what he had to deal with is kind of deal with the level playing field where you didn't know if it was going to be a run or pass, but still he was able to get 17 and a half sacks. He was able to consistently get to the quarterback and knock him down and around, and he was able to really make his mark as a pass rusher. For the Jaguars to go where they eventually want to go, to be a team that makes a deep playoff run and eventually competes for a Super Bowl, he is going to have to be at that level each and every week. And the thing about Hines Allen, he's shown that he's consistent in terms of what he's been able to do throughout the course of his career. And as you're measuring these guys, because remember, when we talk about blue chip players, we're not talking about lifetime achievement awards. As an evaluator, you're talking about here and now. Coming off the last season that they had, this is the player that he is, not what he was 4 years ago. We're talking about right now. And if we're going on right now, Josh Hines Allen has to be included as one of those top pass rushers, top 5, top 6 pass rusher in the league. He certainly deserves that kind of attention. He's an established blue chip player for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you love that because he's an established blue chip player at a premium position that is essential to being able to build the championship puzzle. So that works. The second player that I would regard as an established blue player would be Evan Ingram. And I know Evan Ingram isn't frequently talked about in the same conversation with George Kittle and Travis Kelce, but I Bleav we can begin to make that conversation relevant by talking about what he just was able to accomplish. He's one of only 8 tight ends in NFL history to have over 100 catches in a season. And even though he had 114 catches and only averaged 8 yards, a little over 8 yards per catch, just the significance in terms of being able to have that kind of volume of production pushes him into that category. Now, would I say that Evan is Travis Kelce or George Kittle? No, but I think he's a unique playmaker that deserves to be in his own category in terms of being able to tilt the field for the offense based on what he's able to do. Speed and explosiveness on the outside, quality and dependable pass catcher over the middle of the field, has terrific run after catch ability, which is why you see the Jaguars feature him on bubble screens and tunnel screens and some of the things that are normally reserved for wide receivers. Evan Ingram does that. And 2 years ago, when we saw him in an offense that was really layered, that ran a lot of crossing routes, that put him in a position to catch the ball on the move, he was terrific in that role. When we think about the best pass catchers at the tight end position, he has to be in that category. That's why I have him established as one of the blue chip players for the Jaguars on the roster. Now, here's where I'm a little disappointed and I'm a little upset or troubled. I would say troubled, not upset, more troubled. Okay. So when I look at the Jaguars established blue chippers, I can only confidently say 2 guys deserve to be in that category. Josh Hines Allen, Evan Ingram, based on how they played last year. And so being a hard grader and not being a homer, I think is really, really important that we're transparent about where our players have played, what they look like, and how they stack in comparison to others at the position around the league. To me, Hines Allen and Evan Ingram are the only ones that I can say without question deserve to be in that blue category for the Jaguars. But there are a handful of guys that I would say are fringe blue players for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And when I mean fringe, it depends on how you view them, what you value more than not. But these are the guys that are right on the line, guys that can easily step out of the line and be blue chip players if they play to their talent and their potential next season. And I'm not saying wild stretches of improvement, completely unrealistic expectations for how they can improve on the game, but if they just make minimal improvements, these guys can be in the category of being blue chip players. And the first guy that I'm going to mention is the quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence got paid. There was a lot of controversy, a lot of outrage about whether Trevor Lawrence deserved to be paid or not. He's right up there with Joe Burrow and some others in terms of what the money looks like. But I'm going to say this, his game certainly translates, and his game certainly puts him in the conversation of being a top 10 quarterback. And if you go back to last year, not last year, but 2022, you had conversations about him being a fringe top 5 player at the position. And here's why. Since 2022, when you go and you look at the numbers, Trevor Lawrence has back-to-back 4,000-yard seasons. And at a time where balls are flying all over the yard, everyone is kind of amassing 4,000-yard seasons. He's done it in back-to-back years. And he has done it while also compiling a 46-22 touchdown to interception ratio. That is really good. Anytime you talk about touchdown to interception ratio, ideal is 2-1. If you're able to get to 3-1, you're cooking with gas. He's right where he needs to be when it comes to a 2-1 touchdown to interception ratio since he has been the quarterback under Doug Peterson. Passer rating has not been what any of us would want because ideally you want to see someone complete high 60% completion rate, over 4,000 yards, 2-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Ideally 3-1 would be like exceptional. And then you want to have a passer rating well over 100 because that will say that you are being efficient, effective, while also delivering the explosives that you need to deliver. Trevor has not gotten over that mark in terms of passer efficiency, passer rating. But look, he's shown signs of being able to get there. It takes more consistency. It takes more work. He has to be on his game. But certainly he can get to the point where he has a 100 or better passer rating to go with the numbers that he's produced in each of the past 2 seasons under Doug Peterson. If he gets the passer rating up, reduces the fumble, because that plays a role in terms of the turnovers play a role in the passer rating. If he gets that up to continue with the same numbers, you now have the conversation about Trevor maybe being 6, 7, or 8 on that list of top quarterbacks in the league. If he plays at that level, the Jaguars are exactly where they need to be because the quarterback is going to lead them as far as they can go. And that certainly will put them in the tournament and beyond if he plays at that level. So that's why he's a fringe blue. The next player that I would say is a fringe blue would be Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, to me, is one of the top 5 slot receivers in the game in terms of just playing that role, meaning playing in the slot, doing the damage over the middle of the field, being not necessarily asked to be the lead receiver of the offense, but being a star in his role. He is a superstar in that role as a slot receiver. First year, when we think about with the Jags, 1,100 yards, really effective as they kind of just threw the ball around the yard. They were kind of playing musical chairs on the outside with him and Zay Jones and Marvin Jones and everyone taking flight. Last year, the pieces of the puzzle changed with Calvin Ridley coming in, Marvin Jones going out, Zay Jones being hurt most of the year. Christian Kirk still did damage. In 12 games, Christian Kirk had almost 800 yards. And if not for the injury, he goes well over 1,000 yards. And he might be a guy that pushes close to what I would say the 12 to 1,300 yard mark, just based on how the season was going for him. Average over 13 yards per catch, does a really good job of running routes, is explosive, consistent when it comes to catching the ball, particularly catching the ball in traffic. To me, if Christian Kirk is healthy and available, I would say there's things that he can do that would be very, very similar to what Amon-Ra St. Brown does for the Detroit Lions. Not the exact same player, but there's some similarities in terms of how they can be utilized and how they can dominate as lead receivers from an inside position. So Christian Kirk deserves to be a player that we could say is a fringe blue player heading into training camp. Another player that we can say is a fringe blue player, and we've had some of the conversation about him, and that would be Travis Etienne. When you look at Travis Etienne since 2022, he and Christian McCaffrey are the only running backs to have 1,000 rushing yards and over 1,400 scrimmage yards in each of those 2 seasons. Like, think about that. Think about the high regard and respect that we have for Christian McCaffrey. Travis Etienne is the only other running back that has been able to do that. So when you think about that in comparison with the other running backs in the league, why wouldn't we talk about Travis Etienne eventually being a top 5 player at the position? Why wouldn't we celebrate him and recognize him as one of the premier playmakers in the league at that position? with a healthy Trevor Lawrence, with a full complement of weapons on the outside. Why wouldn't Travis Etienne take those numbers and even watch them skyrocket? Yes, we've heard Doug Peterson talk about lightening his load and maybe giving some of those carries to Tank Bigsby. But the one thing that I know about coaches, when guys get rolling and guys put up big numbers, coaches are reluctant to take them out and not give them those opportunities. So for me, Travis has an opportunity to get into that conversation as a top 5 back because he's explosive, he's dynamic, he can catch the ball out the backfield, but more important, he's terrific on the edges, and the numbers bear it out. He and Christian McCaffrey, only ones the past 2 years, 1,000 yards, 1,400 scrimmage yards. He deserves to get his flowers. So the next player that I would say is a fringe player, and I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball. A fringe blue player, a guy who we can reasonably expect to be a blue chip player for this team. Trayvon Walker, the former number 1 overall pick. It's kind of funny because normally when number 1 overall picks have 10 sacks and have a number of splash plays, normally they're celebrated within the football world. We haven't heard a lot of that around Trayvon Walker's game because, look, let's be honest, the Jaguars fell apart at the end of the year. They didn't make the postseason, so they didn't get an opportunity to get that national attention that would have led to some of those conversations around Trayvon Walker. But what I can say, he and Josh Allen are a terrific tandem. And the fact that Josh Allen is able to get his while Trayvon Walker gets his and gets it in what I would say a much different fashion than the number one number one pass rusher on the team, that would be Hines Allen. To me, it's the perfect blend because everything that you see from Josh Allen when it comes to the finesse, the footwork, the way that he kind of outmaneuvers and slips and slides around blockers is completely different for Trayvon Walker. He is a power player. He wants to overwhelm you. He is a bull in the china shop on the outside, but he also has the ability to line up inside. And because of those unique skills as an outside or inside pass rusher, to me, it's going to be very easy for us to project him getting to that 12, 13 sack number because he's a dominant player, an A-plus athlete, and his game is only getting better. Given draft status and what he's been able to do already, I'm really positive that he moves into the next category and he becomes a blue chip player for the Jaguars. The final player that I believe could be in that category that can kind of move into the fringes, let's say Eric Armstead. And normally, what you try and stay away from is giving players lifetime achievement awards, or rewarding players for what they've done in the past for too long. But the reason why it's a little different for me with Eric Armstead is just because of how effective he could be and should be playing alongside the guys that he's playing alongside, Josh Hines Allen and now Trayvon Walker, two guys that are beginning to establish themselves as a dominant tandem. What that does is that means that Armstead is going to face more one-on-one opportunities. He's going to have more one-on-one opportunities this year than maybe he's had in the past. And I know that I'm fully aware that he has played with Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa commands a lot of attention. But what's different about the Jaguars and the way they do it, Trayvon Walker on one side, Josh Hines Allen on the other side, they are going to command attention. And because one of those guys is going to dictate and command a double team, that means Armstead has more free reign to dominate one-on-one opportunities in the past. If we go all the way back to 2019, and I say we won't talk about lifetime achievement, but back in 2019, the guy had 10 sacks. So he's more than capable of being a dominant interior pass rusher. It's about unlocking him scheme-wise and then making sure that the guys around him dominate to the level where he is always working against the tomato can, meaning the weak link of the offense. If Eric Armstead is able to work against the weak link, he's going to have an opportunity to register 8 or more sacks, and 8 or more sacks will put him in the conversation as a top 10 player at the position as an inside pass rusher, which every team is looking for and needs. So we got the established guys where we talked about Josh Hines Allen. We talked about Evan Ingram being able to mismatch, those guys being clearly established as blues. We talked about the fringe blue players, Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, Travis Etienne, Trayvon Walker, and maybe even Eric Armstead. Well, now we're going to talk about the wild cards. And when I put guys into the wild card category, what I'm doing is trying to give them their just due in terms of being good players, but they need a little more to ascend to that next category. And I'm be honest, this was hard for me to conclude Foye Oluokun as a wild card because I think you really could make the conversation, you can make the debate that he deserves to be in the fringe player. When you think about someone who has 3 seasons in a row where he's had over 100 solo tackles, you think about how important and pivotal he's been to the Jaguars defense in terms of being the traffic cop at the second level, getting everyone lined up, making sure everyone knows what they're doing, how they're playing, setting the tone. I would say with his physicality and toughness, yeah, he is a real dude. And so whether he's a wild card or a fringe player, he definitely can be one of those guys that we talk about as a blue chip player for the Jaguars. And for Mike linebackers in particular, the reason why this is really tricky, normally you only get recognized for being a top 10 player if you play behind a really good defense that allows you to run and chase and get after it. Well, Foye Oluokun is now playing with a defense that has some guys that can command blockers at the point of attack. And so the numbers that we've seen, the tackle numbers, they should skyrocket because teams are going to be reluctant to climb off of Eric Armstead, off of Trayvon Walker, off of Josh Allen to get to the second level. That means more free runs to the running back for Oluokun, more free runs to the quarterback on blitzes for Oluokun. Those free runs, those big hits, those big splash plays changes the narrative and the conversation about Oluokun. So it's not only the 100+ tackles, but it's projecting that this guy is going to have his hands in a lot of splash plays. And we're going to talk about how is he involved in so many game-changing plays at the end of the season. The next player that I would say can go into that wild card category that can go from maybe an unheralded player to one that we recognize as one of the top players in the league. How about Andre Cisco, the safety from Syracuse? When we look at Andre Cisco, last 2 years, he's combined to have 7 interceptions. When we think about the turnover battle and how important and impactful it is to winning games, Cisco's ability to take it away is a game changer. And his game should go up a notch because now he's playing in a system where you have coaches that like to set traps, but they also encourage their guys to go for those plays and really take the ball. Taking the ball away is a priority. Well, for a guy who was a dominant player at Syracuse, if you didn't watch him, Andre Cisco loves being able to just get after the ball, to be a see ball, get ball defender. That's why I'm really optimistic that he is going to be able to take his game up a notch in his defense under Ryan Nielsen and under the tutelage of Chris Richard in the back end. Andre Cisco is a proven ball hawk. We've seen that on tape. Now it's about going from being a pretty good player to a great player to a dominant player. I think it's reasonable to expect him to move into those categories where we can talk about him being maybe a top 10, top 6, top player at the position. That's the expectation. That's what I think everyone should expect in the building, just based on how he's improved over the 2 seasons as being a starter. The next member of the secondary that I think can go into that top 5, that blue chip category. Look, man, we talked about Tyson Campbell for a long time. And Tyson Campbell has been one that everyone is really waiting for him to break out. He shows a lot of promise because of the size, the length, the athleticism. I would say the preparedness that he shows up to work with every day. He studies at it. He works at it. It just hasn't all come together. This might be the year that it comes together because it appears that the scheme really matches his skill set as a player on the island. Long, rangy, tough, really does a really good job of knocking people around and bump and run coverage, and then playing the ball down the field. Man-to-man coverage is about breakaways, pass breakups, passes defense, not as much about interceptions because you're always reacting to the ball late. But Tyson Campbell is a really good man-to-man player. What he needs, little refinement when it comes to playing the ball down the field. But in terms of winning at the line of scrimmage, winning in those close quarters, he has all of that, which is why I think he can be a guy that we talk about and celebrate not only as a Pro Bowl player, but a guy that kind of gets into that conversation as a top 8 player at the position. The last player that I would tell you that I am really looking forward to, and I think he really has a chance to kind of get into that conversation, is going to be Anton Harrison. And Anton Harrison, first-round pick out of Oklahoma last year, played all those games on the right side, really settled in well. We saw the talent kind of take over, settled in after those early games, and was rock solid at the point of attack. And at a time where you can mask some of the flaws of your offensive line with quick rhythm throws and really changing the offense up to be a little more ball control and manageable, the Jaguars are not opting for that. They feel great about what he has been at right tackle, and I wouldn't be surprised to see down the line if he even made a move to the other side because he's played both ways. But this guy has nimble feet, he has athleticism, he has length, he has the nastiness that he's needed, and I think Cam Robinson helps bring that out of him. Those two guys on the edges have the potential to be really good, but I'm saying that Harrison can be a guy that everyone recognizes as an upper echelon talent because this guy has the tools to play at a very high level. And I think as he settles in with his footwork, his length, his athleticism, I think the sky's the limit for Anton Harrison. So as we reflect and go back, Bill Topolian talked about 8 to 12 blue chip players, championship team. I'm telling you right now, they're two established players that we can lean on to kind of be the pillars of that premise. But the other guys are the ones that really will determine whether the Jaguars go from being good to great this year. Established guys, Josh Hines-Allen, Evan Ingram, the guys that can really make a mark in terms of whether this team goes from good to great. Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, Travis Etienne, Trayvon Walker, Eric Armstead, and then the wild cards will be Foye Oluokun, Andre Sisco. We can talk about Anton Harrison and Tyson Campbell. And for good measure, and this is something that is hard to evaluate on tape, even though he really made strides last year, just keep an eye on Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd in this defense, former number 1 pick, played at Utah, did a bunch of different things at Utah in terms of multiple roles. He may reprise that role with the Jaguars under Ryan Nielsen. And if he does that, he's one of those guys that could be a wild card that suddenly emerges as a talented player because the scheme fits his skill set, which is something that has been lacking, I would say, the last couple of years. So there you have it. That's the podcast for the day. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you tell a friend to check us out right here, Bleav In Jaguars. The community is growing. You guys have done a really good job of not only providing feedback that I can learn from, but just continuing to tell your friends because I see the number of subscribers that are coming. Make sure everyone is checking out not only the great content that we have here, but go to the Bleav Network on Fubo. Check out some of the other teams. Let's see what the competition is doing. Let's see if we can make this podcast the best one on the network. Until next time, I'm Bucky Brooks. I'll talk to you.